This evening, we have brought together a very interesting panel led by Patrick Galbraith. Patrick teaches anime and manga at this university and unlikely is working on his second PhD at Duke University after getting one at University of Tokyo. And so Patrick knows more than we do on this subject matter. I asked Patrick one time, how do you know so much about Akihabara? And he said, because I spent every day of my life there for the last year. So he's come back for a second dissertation on that subject matter. The panel today is brought to us entirely by Patrick, and I'll defer to him in a moment. But we have with us also Renato, Rivera, Rusca, and Takashi, Yamaguchi, talking about a very important subject, which is censorship. I suppose, given the fact that this is a Monday night and the subject matter is a little bit far afield, that this won't fall under the new state secrets law. But there is always a concern that these issues, might find themselves on the wrong side of the censor, and hopefully we'll make a small dent in that here tonight. So I will defer this to Patrick, but the presenters will go for about an hour, and then we'll have an extended Q&A, and I think we'll probably have a very engaging Q&A session. So, Patrick.
Thanks for that introduction, Kyle, and thanks everyone for coming out. I know it's a Monday night, and it's kind of hard to find the campus. I heard from a few people, so I really appreciate the turnout. It is a topic that definitely, I think, requires more discussion. So I'm glad we're going to have a little bit of time here tonight to do that. My role in tonight's panel. My role in tonight's panel is more or less to set up. There we go. Is more or less to set up the large kind of discussion that's going on for people who have no idea, no sort of background in manga anime, who are maybe thinking about this more in terms of, for example, state secrets and things like that. So it's thinking more about kind of the larger terrain on which this debate is happening. So I'll be talking a little bit about just basically introducing the topics that the other speakers will go into depth in tonight. But again, we'll have the question and answer to ask specific questions and go into a little bit more depth. I'm going to be looking at this kind of in a broad sort of way, so do forgive me if some of this is not necessarily. Hello. I like to move a little bit. So it's going to be a very brief presentation tonight, and then it's going to set up for the other presenters. So the idea for my presentation tonight is perception. Perception of problems, perceptions of legal gaps, perceptions of how we should in fact deal with sexual expression, norms, things like that. So it's brought together by that. A common starting point for these discussions is, why is there so much sex and violence in manga and anime? I've heard this question over and over and over again, and I'd like you to just I'd like to point out at the very beginning that this is based on a bias, right? So it presumes that manga and anime is a problem, a puzzle to be solved. Why so much sex? Why so much violence? And in the process, what we do is we end up sort of pornographizing, turning into pornography, materials that aren't necessarily that, right? So it's based on sort of, to begin with, a biased view of what cartoons and comics are. So Fred Schott, for example, points out that we compare it to American comic books, which is a very narrow genre, and is in fact targeted at a very specific kind of group. However, in Japan you have this mass medium which targets adults and children, men and women, right? So it actually would be more accurate to compare it to television, for example, or novels, or film. So when you do that kind of comparison, compare media against one another, would you make the argument that television has too much sex and violence? You could make it, but it would be a very broad statement, very hard to defend, right? So in some ways, this should point out that we kind of have a bias going into this. We think of comics, so we think of comics as more or less medium for children. And because of that, we look at comics, manga, in a sort of way that it should be childish, something that's obscene, something that's perverse about this. And that kind of association limits the sort of expressions that you can have. In Japan, this limitation has always been contested, so in fact you have a wider range of possibilities. And the fact that we kind of are able to say something like Japanese pornography is very much based on Oriental bias. Let's just say it right up front. So this is an example of when comics and cartoons from Japan came to the United States. Fox and the LA Times at that point called it Japanese pornography. Right? They took one example, which actually isn't even pornography, it's a softcore kind of titillation series. They took this and they said, Japan is giving us pornography. What is this manga, this anime? It must be stopped. The children will be perverted. Right? So the entire complexity of these media was reduced to this image of, well, it's all for perverts, right? It's all kind of hentai kind of stuff. So this is not a new problem. It's a long-standing sort of debate. This is actually kind of confounded by a second problem, which is style. There's sort of a biased view of manga animes for children, but also kind of the idea that manga anime aesthetics look childish. They're round, they're very soft, and because they look cute, they look young, cute equals young in the sort of bias, because they look young, therefore sex and violence can easily lead to sort of critiques of so-called child abuse materials, right? So we get this kind of bleeding into the general critique of manga and anime, and critiques of specific kinds of expressions as going too far. So this happened just very recently. A man was arrested in the UK and he was actually convicted for possessing illegal images of cartoon children. And his barrister points out that all manga and anime fans should be concerned. They should be watching out. So not pornography, all manga and anime fans. This is key, actually. And he's basing this on legal legislation all around the world, where we're seeing sort of the conflation of persons and images. It's happening all over the place, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom. And basically this legislation is intended to capture manga. They're very clear about it, actually. So these kinds of images are read as particularly problematic, right? So they're sort of thinking about, we're getting this new influx of materials, we have to do something about it. This particular author points out United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, the United States, but actually, the United States is also part of this. For example, in the United States, this is a criminology book, right, that's used in college courses, much like the ones we teach here. Take a look at that. Basically, they have reduced manga and anime in certain forms to, across the board, no doubt about it, obscenity, you will get in trouble, it is a fact, this is kiddie porn. So it's being taught in all sorts of places. And again, this isn't isolated. It's happening across the board. So NGOs, for example, this is a report from 2006. Take a look at this. So it says, child pornography is widely seen in anime or manga, Japanese comics, and in computer games. So widely seen. Sections of civil society, including producers and consumers of child pornography, some academics and lawyers, seem to be desensitized and accepting of this form of child pornography on the grounds of freedom of expression, which is prioritized to the detriment of greater protection of children. Right? So again, a few things to point out here. One is that manga, anime, and games are widely accused of being child pornography, despite the fact that the actual pornographic material is only one subgenre, one small part of a massive industry, a massive kind of thing. Two, we have anybody who disagrees with this assessment being seen as desensitized to the problem. Right? So you, in fact, are part of this Gothic narrative where you're on the bad side, you're against children, you're for the pedophiles. Right? That's the place you don't want to be, right? So in fact, it kind of creates this sort of false right and wrong, black and white, good and bad. It makes it very difficult to critique the kinds of logic we're talking about. Three, studies clearly expose the link between manga and sexual crimes against children, which is simply untrue. Here's one. Here's another. So in fact, a lot of studies say that this is not a verifiable link, right? So we're not actually basing this on statistics anymore, perceptions that perhaps things aren't being recorded, perhaps statistics are wrong. So again, the perception is there must be a problem with the manga and anime culture. Therefore, if the statistics don't show it, we then have to be careful because the statistics are wrong. We perceive the problem, we know it's there. So to recap, we're misrecognizing the prevalence of pornographic material, and in the process, misrecognizing things as pornography. We're misrecognizing the real social problem of violent sex crime against children, and data calls into question supposed connection between these two things. Just to show you kind of the bias we're talking about here, in the United States, very few people would make the kind of simple media effects argument that watching violence produces violent crime, that kind of thing. We don't really use that kind of logic anymore. That is precisely the logic we're using to condemn anime and manga. It's a very oversimplified sort of argument that's being made. And again, the Japanese side does not agree with this. So in Japan, you have less concern about manga and anime, even pornographic varieties, because they don't seem to harm anybody in the production or seem to sort of place anybody in a quantifiably larger or greater risk of sex crime. So obscenity rulings, for example, are talking about genitals being shown, not the age of the depicted character. The amendment to the Tokyo Ordinance, which was in 2010, was talking about zoning. As long as you zone it, again, the expression itself is not a problem. And when they passed new child pornography laws in June of this year, again, manga and anime were not put into the problematic category of child pornography. They don't perceive a problem. Just to show you how different the perception is, after they passed the law in Japan in June of this year, Agnes Chan has been a very, very strong advocate of policing this material as child pornography. She came out in an interview and said, right here, the law is meant to protect children. Manga and anime are separate issues. Right? So even the ambassador to the UN does not see this as a particular problem in the terms that we tend to in the United States. So basically, against this kind of what seems to be a blasé approach, you get all this sort of moral panic and sort of condemnation of Japan in general, but also manga and anime as genres. So for example, the Daily Beast says that Japan's kiddie porn empire. So again, the presumption is manga and anime is kiddie porn. It's been exempted from that law. So 3 important things to note here. Kiddie porn is kind of assumed as a category, even though there's actually a lot of give there. So for example, even if you were to assume manga and anime were child pornography, they would be a virtual variety, which brings up different issues. So 2, no supporting evidence is brought up, and 3, there's a history of discussing thought crimes in Japan, right? So leading back to before the war, actually. And this sort of idea of thought crimes and policing thought, good ideas, has produced a very, very strong free expression group of people, many of whom are in the room tonight, actually, who will go to the wall to say, look, we need to protect the freedom of expression, it's very important. So they actually will speak against laws that seem common sense in other places to defend freedom of expression. And again, Mark McClellan is on the same page when he says, no one is actually harmed in the production or circulation of fictional images. Therefore, freedom of expression comes to the fore. This is exactly the stance for freedom of expression advocates. Okay. So back to the idea of misconception. This is a CNN report that was talking about basically the exemption of manga and anime. Got a lot of play this past summer. Take a look at the terms they use. Sexually explicit manga and anime. Young girls engage in often violent sex with older men as the majority of content, fueling the darkest desires of sexual criminals. The content is so graphic that it needs to be blurred out. It's so sexually explicit that they turned off the undercover cameras. This is what they're saying, right? In a CNN report, some of you might have seen. Okay? Let's take off that mosaic. Let's take it away. This is what they actually looked at. This is what they saw. What is this? It's a horror manga. It is not child pornography or pornography at all. It's horror manga. So they misrecognized it, which is not more violent than a horror film or a crime novel, detective novel, that sort of thing. If we were to put a mosaic over a horror film in the United States and say, the United States is full of child pornography, would that not be odd? So again, you can sort of see how this problem is working here. It reveals our own bias about Japanese pornography. Here's another example, Kuni Kuni Poemu. This is a gag anime, right? It's a joke. It exaggerates sexuality to draw attention to it. In Australia, it's restricted 15. The United Kingdom, restricted 18. In New Zealand, it's refused content. In other words, you will be arrested for owning Kuni Kuni Poemu. It's perceived as a very serious problem, right? It reveals a certain kind of desire, which then will be acted out. So again, you presume the desire and that there will be an actual effect. Both these are presumptions, perceptions. And this is where it leads. It leads to where any content is suspect. So for example, this is Crayon Shin-chan, which is a joke, it's a gag animation, right, for young kids. Because Shin shows his butt, Indonesia says it's pornography. And if you were to add the word child pornography, we probably wouldn't even question it. We'd say, oh my God, Japan is producing this content. Because this is so bizarre, it draws attention to the logic of the whole thing, which itself is quite bizarre. Let's take a look at it. So this feeds back into Japan. This is a TV show, sort of a joke gag show, talking about debates about what's happening in Japanese society. And it talks about Japan's kiddie porn empire, referring to specifically the CNN article. Right? So we should police lolicon, so child pornography, virtual child pornography, police that, right? Members of the Diet are on the panel, and they say, yes, we need to police it. Okay, tell us what you're talking about, sir. For example, this. This is Kodomo no Jikan, child's time. It's not pornography. It's listed as comedy, drama, ecchi, mature, romance, school life, seinen, slice of life. This is kind of treated as child pornography. And in fact, in the United States, they refused to publish it because they were worried that they would be seen as child pornographers by translating and publishing this. So they say that there's no reasonable standard by which this would be appropriate. In fact, there is. It's in Japan. Yeah. So we're seeing kind of a problem here where we're saying, well, there's no standard by which this particular content could be allowed. The content is not that different. In fact, it's less explicit than this, right? So if we are to say that it's not media bias, so if we're saying it's because it's manga, it's a problem. That's a problematic statement, but if we're not, then we have to think about why this isn't or is problematic. And if it is problematic, then basically what we're saying is certain thoughts should not be thought. They should not be shared, because they will in fact lead to possible danger of others. Thoughts should not be thought because they will lead to potential crimes. That's the logic we're talking about. This is pretty wild, actually. That is a literary classic. This is refused content. So 3 important things to note about this. 1, manga anime are targeted specifically because they're visual and accessible. 2, we speculate that the readers of manga is simply sort of uses the material to feed sick desires. And 3, we fear someone might be harboring pathological thoughts, antisocial thoughts, and will be aroused by the material. And we need to sort of make sure that material does not circulate. The logic is such that anything is suspect. So the same show says, should we regulate lolicon manga? Well, look, they're watching shows with girls as the leads. Wow, okay, so anyone who watches Miyazaki Hayao is suspect, yeah? In fact, some people would say that. So we're seeing kind of how this logic goes beyond any one thing. Madoka, which was awarded the top honors in 2011 for being sort of this dark, edgy deconstruction of the magical girl genre, it's said to be a problem, right? So we're reducing very complicated content into pornography. We're pornographizing this kind of content. And it seriously limits freedom of expression. If you can't do Monaco because the characters look cute and they're young and girls, the entire impact of the story, which is based on the tragedy of their lives, is lost, right? We're actually sort of saying you can't express that because it's a dangerous thought. And eventually, it goes so far that even a bathing scene is a problem, right? So when did Japan begin to think that bathing was child porn? That's a weird idea, right? When did Japan seem to begin to think this? They began to think it when they were instilled with what's called the pedophilic gaze. And basically, if you're told that children are pornographic, or sex objects, again and again and again, you have to police yourself in your mind, censor your thoughts. In fact, what that does is it makes you into this kind of suspected pedophile. It puts them into the sex object. It puts you into the sort of viewer, the potential viewer. So children themselves become problematic. It also tends to place the viewer in the position of the pedophile, where even this could be. So it moves from the content to the possibility of the person having the wrong idea in relation to the content. In the United States, fans tend to be very, very panicked about this. So for example, This is someone writing on Kotaku, a very large site. He says, anime is terrible. It used to be okay. Now it's not. It's inbred trailer trash in entertainment form. It's a bunch of shit pandering to perverts and pedophiles. He feels confident to say that this panders to pedophiles. That's a huge stretch of the imagination, right? This either is child pornography or it panders to pedophiles. Anything, again, can be suspect. This magazine talks about manga and anime as sort of a controversial import. This comics expert talks about Azumanga Daioh as part of a larger problem of the cult of the child. The characters look underage, he says. They appear to be underage. Therefore, people who read that manga must be reading it for the underage characters. He goes to his father, who's a child psychologist. The child psychologist says this is dangerous. He repeats that in his article. So again, you have this kind of pathologizing discourse. Here's another example. So recent animation, the character looks like this. She transforms into that. Same character. The character is said to be 19 years old. When she transforms, she looks like a child. I know people who actually would say that the large one is okay, the small one is not. It's the same character. Why do they make that distinction? Because they're afraid that if they say the small one is okay, that they say it looks that they say that they're pedophile, right? They're afraid of being seen in that particular light. So take a look at this. Does this image make you uncomfortable? Some people it would, right? It says forever love. The micronized character is hugging this sort of older male character. But why does it make you uncomfortable? Probably because you think the person who draws it harbors certain kinds of thoughts, right? But how do we know what that person is thinking? And should we be speculating on what that person is thinking? And should we then make things illegal based on the possibility that someone watching it would then think these thoughts that they might be thinking? This is actually a problem of freedom of expression, and it's not hypothetical at all. So for example, in 2010, a man crossing the border to Canada was arrested for child abuse materials. He had on his computer moe-style parody, anime manga-style characters that appear young of the Kama Sutra. Okay? He was advised by the Border Patrol was advised by a detective that they should arrest this man as a potential child abuser. This is the image. Okay? Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in. This is the image. Okay? This is the image. This got a man put into jail. Okay? Is it obvious that this is child porn? Can we judge the age of those characters? Can we actually even judge if it's a male or a female? No, we can't actually, because it's an abstracted, deformed caricature of human beings. If we begin to say that this could be dangerous, then in fact we instill in people's minds that the manga anime style image itself is suspect. The whole thing. And what this leads to is this kind of idea that basically, based on speculation, we imagine crimes, we imagine police crimes where there are none, right? This is nothing other than thought policing. And freedom of expression comes to the fore here. We don't know what manga and anime fans are thinking, but the law ought not be based on speculation or regulation of thoughts, whatever those thoughts may be. It's a very slippery slope. So tonight, Renato is going to be talking to us about basically the two sides of this debate and the way people are sort of misunderstanding on two sides of the Pacific. And then Takashi is going to be talking to us more about the legal standpoint of what's happening with the law, which I sort of left out here, and also looking at beyond manga and anime in Japan, where this is kind of going right now. So thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing other perspectives.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to Kyle for pulling the strings, and also to Patrick for creating the puppets, basically, that we are going to see the metaphor. Okay, so my name is Renato Rivera. I teach at Meiji University and others. Today I came from Senshu University. It's a bit of a pain in the neck to get here, but I'm glad I am, because this is a full house and everyone had quite a trek apparently. So, right, my presentation is entitled Inculturation and Acculturation Dynamics within Discourse Surrounding the Exclusion of Manga Anime from the 2014 Japanese Child Pornography Law Reform. It sounds extremely long. It's not. It's actually a very, very basic, simple thing that I'm going to explain. Just one real main point, and that's the to and fro, the kind of cultural trade and like perceptions that we exchange across the Pacific. And I'm going to basically frame it in basically the same way and in the same order that Patrick did. So think of that as the the template. I'm just going to go into a bit more detail. So I'll begin with defining the concepts of enculturation and acculturation. And then I'll go on to the background of how this law reform that we're talking about, that Patrick described, the exclusion of manga in the possession of child porn law here in Japan in summer 2014, June 2014. To understand that, you need to look, first of all, at the original LDP proposal from 2011. I'll go into that. So then once you've got the child porn reform, okay, it's done, you're now having to try to break down how English language press has put forward this news. How are they broadcasting this? What are they focusing on? What keywords are they using? You'll find something very interesting, which is that a lot of the outlets that broadcasted this news are typically left-leaning outlets. However, their rhetoric sounds very, very right-wing, intriguingly. So then lastly, I'll talk about what acculturation is, which is kind of basically a mirror effect that Japan likes to, not likes to, but kind of like is bound by its own image created in the West, and is trying to fit that image as best possible. And so we're going to see how it does that, what ways. Okay, so, oh my god, that's a lot of Japanese. Right, well, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Basically, this is the original Liberal Democratic Party proposal in September 2011 for a reform on law. The health of our youth must be protected. How are they going to do this? Well, back in the olden days, we used to ban the production of porn. We used to ban the production of child porn. Ban the production of child porn, ban the distribution of child porn, but we never talked about banning the possession of child porn. So we have to really look towards doing that. Back in 2011, this was proposed. The key phrase is actually here, sarani. Additionally, manga, anime, game, software, all these things are terrible. So here's my translation. In addition, we should take notice of the virtual, obscene imagery and depictions of sexual abuse seen in manga, anime, and games, and do something to stop this ongoing torrent of child pornography. Right. So originally it's about protecting children, protecting young people, making sure that they grow up right. But we've got to stop this ongoing torrent of child pornography. We need to immediately prevent people from visiting child pornography sites on the internet and ensure all possession of child pornography is punished as a crime. Okay, you'll find very few people to argue against that. But one of the clauses in here is very interesting. It says, those who possess child pornography for the purpose of satisfying one's sexual curiosity shall be punished. What other purpose would they have? In my case, it would probably be for research. Certainly, Mark McLennan, whom you quoted earlier, I know that he was arrested, or at least had all his stuff confiscated at the border in Australia. Is child pornography harmful to society? Well, the creation of child pornography, certainly, for example, taking a photograph, can be a form of child abuse. This really is a child abuse prevention law. it may have detrimental effects on the child, and thus is an act with consequential victims, and therefore harmful to the well-being of society, all of which Patrick already described. However, this is already illegal. We're already cutting us off at the root, and many arrests have already been made. So, can we establish then the existence of victims or harm in society's well-being as a result of possessing an image, whatever that image may be, for one's own personal use? And so what are the arguments for and against? Well, the problem is that we don't even get to that stage yet. The problem in trying to understand the real arguments for and against is that the debate cannot begin because there are certain enculturated attitudes, right? Enculturation is basically, did I skip a slide? I did skip a slide. Here we go. These are the definitions that we're going to be using today. Enculturation. Thanks to Merriam-Webster, we can say that it is the process by which an individual learns the traditional content of a culture and assimilates its practices and values. Acculturation, on the other hand, is the cultural modification of an individual, group, or people by adapting to or borrowing traits from another culture, also emerging with cultures as a result of prolonged contact. Okay, fine. To describe this in a more understandable fashion, we can use the Talcott Parsons example, cultural anthropologist. He gives the example that infants, babies, kids, they're born with no enculturated thought. They move and act according to instinct. After 2 or 3 years old, they start to judge by people's reactions, maybe other kids, how they should act. And also, of course, they're raised by their parents who teach them about morality and how to live within society. So we're really looking at an appropriation of cultural norms, which is creating some kind of cultural hegemony. Okay? And in modern globalized society, unlike society of previous ages, where, you know, those guys, oh, they're in enculturated society, they tend to eat pizza a lot, they tend to eat pasta a lot. So that's how you get stereotypes, right? You can judge that that is probably an Italian origin person. In globalized society, we're adapting to this foreign hegemony, and so acculturation is taking place. So we'll see what examples are representative of this dynamic here. Okay, so where was I? So, because of these certain enculturated attitudes, we can't begin to even step up to the podium of the debate. English language news tends to lean towards a Western-centric attitude, and it actually condemns the very inclination of pedophilia itself. We'll see how they do it. And we need to look at Japanese sources then, to see where the real issues are. But we all know Japan has very little investigative journalism. Right? Blogs, opinion columns, editorials are really the only small windows where we can see possibly the seeds of a debate even begin to take place. Japanese crime statistics, they continue to show that Japan is among the safest, if not the safest, among developed nations. The number of rape cases dropped from 4,677 in 1972 to 1,500 by 1995. And if you try to correlate that with the way that Japanese pornography has been regulated, then deregulated, gravure, right? Pornography, Miyazawa-rie, Santa Fe, right? The end of prohibition of pubic hair depiction correlates with a decrease in crime. So you could argue that that was an outlet. Now, I'm not going to argue that because correlation does not mean causality. You know, that's basically, yes, this is 101. But people do argue this, right? Okay, so, you know, people argue that looser restrictions therefore correlate to a safer society. Let's take an extreme example. What is the staggering number of child abuse accusations and admissions thereof towards clergymen? So when we look at what this law is actually trying to do, it should be about protecting children, But is it instead about blocking triggers for criminals as a preemptive crackdown on potential crime? Something might happen, so let's try and stop this here. You know, what you described as thought control. So we're going to look into that as well. Hey, look. So I was probably called here because I did this online show speaking specifically about how the UK, in particular, and to a lesser extent the US, has put forward this, these kind of news items about how manga was exempted from this law reform. And I wanted to provide some context to that. There is a cultural reason why this happened, why this is played out. Right, so this guy here on the left is called Keisuke Hirota. He is a freelance anime writer. He writes for Shukanshi as well as Shukanshi are the weekly kind of topical news magazines that also tend to have kind of otaku content increasingly these days, but also more mainstream animation magazines. But he's also a political activist more recently. So he has this Nikonama show called Hyogen no Jiyu, Hyogen no Fujiyu, which is the non-freedom of expression. So I was a guest trying to contextualize these news pieces. For example, I added the information to try and understand why British press, in particular, is so sensitive to cry foul over any inkling that anyone might be a paedophile. In the year 2000, the news of the world, now infamous because of the phone tapping scandals, is now defunct, actually. They had something called a name and shame campaign. They published a name list of registered pedophiles. These guys had gone to prison, they'd been rehabilitated, supposedly, and now they're back in society. But they're still a threat, right? Interestingly, the mob mentality led to widespread violence, some against innocent people. There's a guy called Ian Armstrong that happens to share the name with a registered pedophile, and of course these guys, random guys, just look at you and me, grabbed a brick and shoved it through his window. And then he came out, and you know, the BBC interviewed him, all these people interviewed him, and he said, hey guys, no, look, I'm on your side. I have children of my own. Yeah, I want these guys to be treated to justice as well, but you know, it's not me, right? So it's not, he's not even saying, you guys are weird, you guys are overreacting. He's actually saying, no, I agree with you, yes, you should throw bricks at people, just not me. So, you know, the other thing that was timely, because this broadcast was in July, was, you know, some of you may know, Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, all these very, very famous, almost like a typically British, even though Rolf Harris is Australian, TV personalities for kids, right? And it turns out that since the 70s, they've been molesting children. So the recent news is a child abuse image investigation leads to 660 arrests. So more than 650 suspected pedophiles have been arrested. Yeah, great. Okay, so Susie Hargreaves, who is with this Internet Watch Foundation, she says it just goes to show that actually, if you're out there, you're looking at the images, you're doing something criminal. It's not a victimless crime. He doesn't describe how it's not a victimless crime. She rather just blanket statement, if you're looking at it, then you're a criminal. Industry has to find inventive ways of blocking the flow of such horrendous pictures, which are only produced through the suffering of defenseless children, many of who are not even old enough to go to school. Right, correct. They should find a way of blocking this flow, right? But the idea that you are looking at something, you are thinking something, you might be a potential criminal, is now completely undermined, because you are a criminal if you're even thinking it. It's a crime. Okay, so I'm going to go through just a few examples of these English language reports of the exception of manga from this child porn law reform, okay, in Japan. So, Japan Times. Japan Times is based in Japan, of course, but it's an English language newspaper that often has left-leaning sensibilities. Japan to finally outlaw possession of child porn, but manga gets free pass. Okay, let's take a look at the headline. Japan finally, at long last, they finally come to their senses. But manga gets free pass. Okay, so we have this big success, but now, you know, you almost had it. Oh, such a shame. You let one go through the net. Here's the lead of the article. A ban on the possession of child pornography came a step closer on Wednesday, but it would exclude pedophilia portrayed in manga. Okay, so this is very much problematizing the manga exception. However, read the rest of the article, and only the 4th and 9th paragraphs actually mention manga in any form whatsoever. Here's the 9th paragraph. It says, Japan's porn industry is huge, and foreign visitors note the ubiquity of sexual imagery showing young-looking girls in school uniforms. While it is unusual to see people in Japan openly reading pedophilic manga in public, mainstream comic books read by commuters sometimes contain sexualized images that many Westerners find unpalatable. That's the end of the article. Many Westerners find unpalatable. So, who cares? Is the law made for Westerners, or is it made for people in Japan? This is an actual news article. Also, I should point out that writing newspaper articles 101 is you have the headline, you have the lead, and then you have added details at the end. But if you have manga in the headline, manga in the lead, you better describe what it is you're talking about, but they don't. Okay, English language media, number 2. Yes, where have we seen this before? So, CNN, sexually explicit Japan manga evades new laws on child pornography. Again, problematizing the exemption of manga rather than they passed this law, right? Okay, to CNN's credit, they do have a separate news article about the passing of the law. This one is just focusing on the exemption of manga. Good, that means we should get a bit more substance than the Japan Times article. So let's take a look. Ken Akamatsu, does anyone know who Ken Akamatsu is? Of course you do. So he's a very famous manga artist. His most famous work in the West is probably Love Hina. Love Hina is not a pornographic manga. It does have some erotic content, perhaps because it is a harem anime, one guy surrounded by lots of beautiful girls. Alright. Ken Akamatsu, who lobbies, this is my emphasis, lawmakers on behalf of the Japan Cartoonists Association, said a total ban on explicit content would damage the entire industry, making creators too scared to put pen to paper in case they risk breaking the rules. You gotta hand it to CNN, because they tell you that there is a debate. They try to paint it as if, okay, here's the pro side and here's the anti side, alright? Here are the advocates, here are the people against. But the way they frame it, clearly they have no qualms against showing which side they're standing on. Ken Akamatsu who lobbies. CNN usually tends to be more liberal than, say, Fox News, right? Liberal readers tend to be more sensitive to words such as lobbyists, lobbying, lobbies. Why? Because the NRA, because tobacco lobbyists, they're taking over, those capitalist fat cats, right? So, if Ken Akamatsu is saying he's lobbying people, he's lobbying politicians to make an exception, please just let us go, let us have our cake and eat it too, then he is the enemy. This isn't even an argument about freedom of expression or anything like that. He's a lobbyist, so, that's him. He's painted black. All right. Masata Tsuchiya. So, Tsuchiya. Sorry, typo. He'll come up time and again, but he's interviewed here again. And he comments, I believe that this kind of material is not protected by freedom of expression. Okay, so you can't say that freedom of expression is bad, but you can say that some of it, some representations of freedom of expression are wrong. A March 2012 government white paper said the number of child abuse victims jumped 20% between the 2011 and 2012, and the number of victims, arrests, and cases are at their highest level since they started compiling statistics in 1999. Okay, if you just read this part of the article, you might think, oh, well, okay, right then. Well, something has to be done about that. What's important is what happened before 1999. Because what happened during 1999 is that they actually implemented the law banning the distribution and production of child pornography. So we need to be able to compare how many child abuse cases, how many child rape cases, how much crime there was before that to know whether the regulations are effective or not. CNN doesn't make any mention of this, so it looks like it's a one-way slope. Okay, English language medium number 3. Japan's kiddie porn empire, bye-bye. Everybody picked up on this story. It's the Daily Beast, again, as you've just seen in Patrick's presentation. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody in Japan. This is the one that everyone got really, really annoyed over. On News Channel, on lots of blogs. So I was very, very interested in this. Okay, written by Jay Galbraith, we'll talk about him. This law is designed to protect the rights of children, says Minyoku Fukuda, an LDP politician and House Representatives member who has actively supported the bill. Right, you had the same quote, I think, as well, Patrick. So, Fukuda is not Tsuchiya, right? They're both LDPs, they're both representatives, House of Representative members. Tsuchiya is very much, let's just ban it. This person is explaining why they exempted it. Okay, so far so good. This, so this is in quotation marks. It looks like it's a quote from Fukuda. It's not. Sorry, I want to make it clear that this is actually a quote from the main text of the article. What it does not do is discourage fantasies about all sorts of child abuse stimulated by manga and anime and ever more sophisticated computer games. It does not do this. What law discourages fantasies? Is this an argument towards let's make a law that does discourage fantasies? So the reason I was particularly interested in this article is because it was written by Jay Galbraith. So let's do some background on him. Who is he? He's the author of Tokyo Vice, which I'm sure many of you have read, many of you have at least heard of. It's being made into a movie soon, I hear. Tokyo Vice is an account of the deep underworld of Japanese organized crime. So Jake Alstein has been in Japan for many, many, many years. He was a journalist for Yomiuri Shimbun. His Japanese is perfect. He was also, most recently, instrumental in bringing the case of Ikumi Yoshimatsu, former Miss International, and her family being hounded by Genichi Taniguchi, burning production with his Yakuza roots, to the Japan Foreign Correspondents Association. Why did he take it to Japan Foreign Correspondents Association? Because the Japanese media wanted nothing to do with it. They didn't want to talk about it, because if they do, it might reveal that, hey, a lot of these jimusho might, talent jimusho, right? They might have some shady dealings going on there, and it might create this snowball effect. And so they didn't want to do that. So this guy knows his stuff, and he should know better was my first reaction when I was reading the article. He then goes on to talk about under 15 junior idols and AKB48 and how that's the real problem. And I think that that is certainly one of the key discussions that we should begin to be having. I honestly do. But that's not the focus of this article. This focus is manga. Okay, so the Young Turks. This is probably the final one. Child pornography in manga comics finally banned. For those of you who don't know, the Young Turks is this very, very leftist news commentary program on YouTube. They are for gay rights, they are for legalization of marijuana, all this is pro-choice. Child pornography in manga comics finally banned. First of all, they got the title wrong. It wasn't banned, that's the whole point, that's why we're discussing it. Everything else was banned, not manga. And so, you know, and they say that in the show, so it's not like they misunderstood. Like, whoever wrote the title was wrong. One of the Kardashians actually made a response to this and said, it's great that they've banned it. Okay, so you didn't watch the video. At 2:30, I actually have the clip here, but you know, I don't want to go over time, so if we have time, then I'll show you. This is what this interesting lady was saying. When you look at cultures that are generally repressed, this is the kind of thing that comes out of it. When everything is driven underground, things get real weird. And so weird, you will find from time to time that people's arguments tend to devolve into the, but it's just weird scenario. First of all, they are for the illegalization of manga, right? They are flabbergasted that it is an exemption to this law. And yet, their logic is based on, but you know, this culture is very suppressed sexually, and so that can't be good. So, why are they for further suppression of this? Is it an outlet? They then go on to talk about the Taliban. It is actually a very interesting analogy, which makes little sense. I'm not going to waste time on it. If we have time to play a video, then I certainly you should look at it on YouTube at least. Anyway, so we've seen various articles so far. The common points are that they're reinforcing a clear agenda to perpetuate a condemnation of certain thoughts. They very, very rarely mention anything about protecting the safety of children, blah, blah, blah. It's more like, okay, no, you're thinking along the wrong lines. You should not be thinking like this. Comments do not necessarily reflect these views, however, by which I mean internet comments. All of these articles have online counterparts, and you are free to comment on them. And so the real debate is actually going on there. There are more opportunities for discussion. However, these comments do not have a forum of their own. They're not represented in any official media outlet. Why not? That's what a debate should be. Well, here's the debate here. Again, Patrick brought it up already, but now we're going to begin to look at the way that Japan was reacting to these reactions to what Japan was doing. So, Takashi's TV Taku, alright, broadcast September the 1st, 2014. Anime to Hanzai. So, anime and crime. Lolicon, 暴力, anime. 規制は必要? Do we need to regulate lolicon? And lolicon is Lolita complex, anyone who's not sure yet. And violence, right? So, lolicon violence, is there a need to regulate anime content? The hour-long program made only actually a brief mention of violent images during the introduction. What are we talking about when we say lolicon anime? What are we talking about when we say violence? Lolicon, you know, Patrick already described it. They showed clips from Madoka Magica, etc., etc. Nanoha as well. For violence, they showed a clip of Attack on Titan. Shingeki no Kyojin. Extremely, extremely popular, and they're treating it like, look at this anime. Like, oh, I've never seen that before. Go out in the street, take a look. So, go to a convenience store. Why do they bring this up if they're not even going to talk about it? The rest of the 1 hour program had no mention of violence whatsoever. It focused on moe and lolicon depictions. You could say it had no mention of pornography, right? Here we are again. Did I say Tsuchiya again? Look, it's Tsuchiya. Okay, I'm sorry. So, Matsuda Tsuchiya, he is, again, a proponent of regulating manga anime content, and his arguments were shot down by Tatsuya Egawa, who is a manga author, manga artist. Tokyo University story, which is kind of an erotic tale of students, actually. He said, so look at what he's saying here. Those who understand Japanese and are able to read this. よくないんですか? よくないのは宮崎アニメですよ。巧妙にやるとバイオレンスが隠されてるのは一番危ない。Miyazaki anime is the problem. It's not, look, it's porn, you know. Look, it's porn is not a problem. If you're looking at something and you are noticing that it is erotic, that it is eroticism, that's okay. The problem is when it becomes orthodox. He argues that hidden eroticism and violence produces latent desires. Miyazaki anime is the most dangerous because of this. Because there is violence in there, and it is orthodox. It is erotic. However, the rebuttal against him is just, you know that criticizing Miyazaki is only going to drive people away. People who are for your position, who are saying, hey, this guy makes a lot of sense, now hate you, by the way, after you just said that you hate Miyazaki anime. What does this do? This doesn't help the argument one bit, because now it reinforces the encultured hegemony that I was talking about. Right? You can't go against the word of God. Japan's kiddie porn empire. Again, the Daily Beast article. So, the reason this is brought up here on this TV show is, again, because it made such a big splash within the subcultures over here. The channel talked about it, these bloggers talked about it, and so, what are these guys talking about? they come and pick up the big story that everyone had a link to, basically. So, Japan's kiddie porn empire. The next scene you see is keep out, keep out, keep out, keep out. 日本のアニメは海外では規制されている. You know, that's the narration that they used. Alright. Is Japan anime being regulated abroad? Oh no. Why are they asking this question? What do they care if it is? Well, it's probably because there must be something to regulate that we're missing. We must be doing something wrong. It's almost like, you know, you're getting ready to go out. Does my hair look weird? Do I look fat? You know, you want to be on the global stage, you better play according to the rules. Oh, by the way, they also interviewed lots of foreigners in Akihabara, and they were saying, yeah, we come to Japan because we want to see the deregulated stuff. So again, what is the message that they're trying to say? They don't want the regulated stuff. Foreigners are interested in the deregulated stuff. Not to mention that a lot of the mosaic blocking of genitals is unblocked for the West, but of course they don't mention that. Oh, okay. So, you know, this lady, again, I'm repeating myself now, but towards the end of every debate, the argument of the regulation advocates always, invariably, devolves into, but it's weird! それなのおかしいでしょ? That's what she was saying. But it's weird is literally one of the last things that is uttered on the TV show. I found it rather, just to break up the tension here, I found it rather amusing that the end credits roll to Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. Is that irony or is that poetic justice? I don't know. Alright, so here's another reaction from Japan. This is a more serious one. Mainichi Shimbun, the Mainichi. So this is an op-ed piece opinion. Child porn ban, my translation. One step towards protecting children. Okay, so we're talking about protecting children. Good, right. Good thing that we banned child porn, fine. However, look at the last paragraph. It is clear that the excessive sexualized images in Japanese anime and the like, such as manga, and games, etc., are strongly criticized overseas. Even if it is just animation, the widespread proliferation of works in which children are sexualized will lead to a worldwide loss of trust for Japan. Well, that has nothing to do with protecting children. Is this about protecting trust for Japan, then? Well, why? I mean, it really is just a mirroring. How do I look today? Again, Keisuke Hirota comes back. I'm not in this one. He gets, so this is the freelance writer and activist that I was talking about, right? His non-freedom of expression, volume 2. He has a debate with Tsuchiya. He's back. Tsuchiya loves to use this one example that he repeats over and over, and then he says, I have no other data to back up my claims. So now, no. He can prepare all he wants. He was notified in advance. You have 2 hours debate. You didn't get to say what you wanted to say in the CNN article. You didn't get to say what you wanted to say in the TV tackle, Takashi's TV show. We give you a forum. You can debate with us. Come on. What do you have to say? How can you justify banning anime and manga porn? Okay, well, here are the highlights. Girl 2 was killed in a supermarket toilet. This is a news item from 2 years ago that Tsuchiya really refers to very, very often, basically every time he's interviewed. Manga was found in the perpetrator's home. That's it. So we gotta get rid of manga, right? We also have to get rid of breakfast, because he probably had breakfast before he ate. Before he killed the girl. Okay, availability of these contents lowers the threshold for sex crimes. That's really what he wants to say. Okay, right. But if the proliferation of these sexual contents goes around, then the norms and the morals of society are going to go down, and the inclination to perform these acts in reality is going to increase. Well, whatever. So here's a wall of writing. But this is really important here. Okay, so Hirota, this is one excerpt of the debate. Hirota brings up the recent case of rape and murder of 1,400 children as young as 11 in Rotherham, South Yorkshire, in the UK. Okay, in August 2014. He says, this is happening in a country that has very strict regulations on comic books. The aim here is, okay, Tsuchiya is the one who wants to ban anime. The burden of proof is on him to give us a correlation between the existence of this anime, the proliferation of this anime, and crime, causality of crime. Okay, burden of proof on him. This is happening in a country that has very strict regulations on comic books. Tsuchiya's response is, yeah, but what would have happened if they hadn't had any regulation? Have you thought about that? So Hiro says, no, this means that regulation has no effect. Tsuchiya says, well, there are sex crimes in Japan as well. Yeah, I don't have the data with me today, but, and then Hiro says, okay, well, I have the data for child rape and molestation cases in Tokyo for Heisei 24 right here. 66 cases, and in most, the fathers of the victims are the perpetrators, of which 20 were biological fathers, 30 were foster fathers, 12 stepfathers. The remaining 4 cases were committed by other men. This shows that child molestation is most common among adults and children with some sort of relation. It is a far more everyday experience, therefore, it's far more everyday occurrence than those violent crimes that you see on TV. Right. But Tsuchiya says, but that, I mean, you know, that just, it goes back to the Bible. At which point, I was watching this on Nikonama live, the comments screen just went completely, I think it almost broke my computer. There's another guy involved in the debate, his name is Saomiya-san, and he is also an advocate of freedom of expression. Right? He says, what does the Bible have to do with any of this? He also says, no, we're talking about now. We're talking about the Bible. And so she says, no, it's not about now. This is very, very deep roots. And then Saomiya just breaks it out. He says, okay, but there was no anime or manga during the time of the Bible. The argument then devolves into, yeah, dakara. And then, yeah, dakara. Yeah, dakara. This is not related to that. You're talking about 2 different things. Oh, so you do admit that there's no relation between manga and the causality of child rape and things like this. No, that's not what I'm trying to say. So, okay, we've given this guy 2.5 hours. He doesn't want to debate. This seems to indicate that there has not been enough discussion on this topic at all to move the story forward. How can you discuss laws and pass them? How can you not discuss laws and then pass them? When asked who will regulate anime and manga, for example, and how, Tsuchiya said, well, it's difficult. I don't know, it's not me, you know? They say that, like, the conclusion comes first, and then the path to that follows. That's basically what we're talking about here. Okay. This is the last slide that I'll end on. Here we have some reactions to the story of a man with a photo of his grandchild playing in water was arrested in the UK for possession of child porn. Right? His grandchild playing in water. Okay, so the reactions in Japan are, Nihon mo kou naru da. Japan is going to become like this as well. Yeah, so you know, this is the future of Japanese society. To be fair, I looked for this real story. It may have been made up here in Japan, because I certainly didn't find it. Certainly the story that Patrick brought up that was, I think this week or just last week's, where the guy did actually get arrested for possessing manga, that is true. This one, I can't find the original article. Everyone just links back to JCast News here in Japan. So, you know, people might be trying to take advantage of the lack of discourse on this. And that's a dangerous thing in itself. So, just to conclude, to wrap up what we've looked at, the Western enculturated rhetoric regarding pedophilia permeates the news media, and it shows in its criticism of Japanese society. But the comments show that people are smart. The comments on these articles. They know that there is a debate there. There's just no forum for such a debate because of the entrenched fear. There is fear. It's almost like, you know, you're watching gay porn and you think, well, maybe I might be gay. I might turn homosexual if I watch gay porn. That kind of illogical fear is really what we're dealing with here. The extension to this thought control that's what it becomes. If I watch pedophile manga or anime, I might in turn become a pedophile. Japan, always needing a mirror to look into, then absorbs these reactions in a process of acculturation. But why? Why is it doing this right now? Because now is, you know, global standard. You have to look to the sekai, you know, the globe, the world, go out and forth and multiply. It also might have something to do with we got to clean up our image before the 2020 Olympics. That's just my opinion, but you can't say that there's no anything there. You know, the state secrets law. You can't say that doesn't have anything to do with Fukushima. You know. So all of this is related, I think. So this is a very, very small window into a very, very big problem, and we should really start discussing it properly, like adults. I may have gone way over time, I'm sorry. But thank you very much, that's it for today.
Where's the switch for turning on and off the slide?
The switch for turning off and on the slide? You mean this?
Yeah.
Oh, but this is mine. Well,
That's yours. Oh.
no, it's okay. Just plug it in, and then, oh no, the battery's running out, but be careful. It might die, but forward and back.
They think that the talk is over. No,
They think the talk is over. No, there's still more.
He's obviously going to start arguing along the exact same as he has as your desk.
I'll leave it
Yeah. And I mean, everyone's arguing against these regulations, but it's very shocking.
Nico.
So this is backward and forward, this button here is the pointer in the middle.
okay, backward, forward.
It should
Hi. Hi. First of all, I have to tell you that my talk may be boring compared to my two colleagues sitting over there. I'm usually to talking before a judge, not before a large audience. My name is Takashi Yamaguchi. I'm a lawyer. I am currently a partner at Link Law Office, Kito & Partners in Chiyodaku, Kojimachi. And I've been practicing law in Tokyo ever since 2001. I've always been interested by this area of freedom of expression, especially because I like doujinshi and I've been involved in the comic. I've been going to the comic market since I was like 17, so that's almost 21 years, and I never missed a single one. And I also am a staff member over there. And also, as for this free speech issues, I have been doing a lot of lobbying. I've handled cases, and I have also been writing about it. Unfortunately, not in English, but in the blogs about it. I represented the Shogunkan case, which was the first case in which the obscenity of erotic manga was contested for the first time in our courts. I was also one of the protesters against a non-existent Youth Hijitsuzai Seishonen bill for the Tokyo Metropolitan Assembly. And I did that, and currently I am the legal counsel, defense counsel for the Rokude Nashiko, who is an artist, a vagina artist, in fact, who was charged with obscenity for making a third dimension print of her vagina and distributing data. So my talk is going to be about the current trends of regulation against sexual expression, the logics and the politics behind the application of obscenity law, the Article 175 of the Criminal Code. So, as I told you beforehand, this may be a little bit boring, but please bear with me. First of all, I have to explain about what the current status of the Rokude Nashiko case is right now. Rokude Nashiko is, how many of you know about the Rokude Nashiko case? Please raise your hands. So, okay, so many of you are pretty familiar with the case. What's the current status? Well, Rokude Nashiko, first of all, is charged with distributing obscene electromagnetic records. And what's her legal status right now? She is a higisha. Higisha means the accused, that in which an indictment has not yet been filed yet. So she is not hikoku means defendant at a criminal trial. So we hopefully that she would not reach that status. And the investigation, well, is still going on. The police are trying to summon her for interrogations. I don't know what the police want to interrogate for her because all the objective facts for the case has been collected. So I only think that they're trying to only coerce confession from her, and so there's a struggle between the defense team and the police going on. The prosecutor is yet to make a decision whether to indict her, means bring the case to court, or to dismiss the case. Now, as for the rough timeline, July 12th of this year, Rokure Nashiko was arrested at her home. And in July 14th, the prosecutor filed a motion seeking a detention order to the Tokyo District Court. And on July 15th, the judge at the Tokyo District Court issued a detention order, which means detention order means that you could hold somebody in jail for 10 days for purposes of investigation. Well, in July 17th, the defense attorneys filed a junkokoku. Junkokoku is like an appeal. It means that when a judge issues an order, when you file a junkokoku, it means we seek to have the order reviewed by a separate panel of judges. Because writs and warrants are issued by a single judge, we can seek to have it reviewed by a panel of 3 judges. And so we file for a junkokoku. Usually this is not admitted usually. I mean, I think the chances of being admitted are like 1% or 2%, but I don't know, miracle, or I want to believe that it's a result of good lawyering, but the panel accepted our junkokoku, and Rokure Nashiko was freed. She's free. So she's not under bail, or she's not under any condition of any kind to do it, but so she's free, but the investigation is going on. So that is the correct status of the case. Now, Criminal Code, Article 175. Now, this is the article that we're worried about in obscenity. Okay, and this is what it covers. A person who distributes, sells, or displays in public an obscene document, drawings, recording, media containing electromagnetic records or other objects shall be punished by imprisonment with a work for not more than 2 years, a fine of not more than 2.5 million yen, or a petty fine. So I just put it in red where I want to just describe. So what I just wanted to describe first, and then the sentence continues. The same shall apply to a person who distributes obscene electromagnetic data, records, or other data. Second clause, this says the same shall apply to a person who possesses the objects or data mentioned in the preceding clause for the purpose of sale. As you can see, the definition of obscene is not described in the statute. In fact, it's not described anywhere in the law, but there's only judicial interpretation. Where's the pointer?
The red button.
Okay. Now this sentence here, the same shall apply to a person who distributes obscene electromagnetic records or other data. This is the part that Rokure Nashiko was charged with. Now, the Article 175 is a statute that is aimed to protect public morality about sex. So, no victims are required, so nobody has to be actually offended by seeing it. Oh, I'm so offended, or I'm emotionally hurt. That's not required. What it does, I just want to show you the other slide. It punishes distributions, selling, or displays in public. So what it does not punish is, it does not punish creations, and it also doesn't punish distributions made to a small number of specified people. And also, for the Article 175, unlike the youth protection ordinances that exist in most prefectures around Japan, except for Nagano, adult only is not a defense. So you could say, well, I only intend this for adults, but it's not a defense in case of obscenity, because obscenity means that you can't show it to anybody, even if it's an adult. And there are no limitations of forms of expression, so it could be verbal, I literally, and theoretically, I could, you know, something really obscene right over here and be charged with it. Or it could be text, it could be a novel. Of course, it could be manga, it could be anime, it could be movies, it could be anything. There's no limitation of forms of expression. Defining obscenity. Well, the earmarking case was the Koyama versus Japan. It took place in 1957. Well, it could be also called the Lady Chatterley's Lovers case. And this is the Supreme Court ruling that came out in this year, and that set out the definition of obscenity. To be exact, this definition was in place before this court ruling, but in the pre-war period, before we lost the war and we got the new constitution. But you know, the big issue was, well, now that the constitution, we got a new constitution, would the interpretations be different? And the answer to the Supreme Court's answer to that was no. I think it could have been a sort of like a backlash. I could only surmise, but it could have been sort of like a backlash against, you know, being pushed American kind of, you know, the culture and American point of view. It was sort of like a backlash because all the Supreme Court judges on that panel were jurists who had experience, naturally, from the pre-war era. They were all jurists from the pre-war era, and this is what they ruled. To be obscene, the literature in quest must be such that is harmful to a normal feeling of shame, excites and stimulates sexual desire, and runs counter to good moral concept regarding sex. Now, it's hard to make out what it's saying, even to a law student, so I just wanted to make a layman's approach and put it to 3 points. There's 3 requirements that it must be met, and all 3 must be met for the obscene. This is called the Chatterley standard, and it's still in effect right now. First of all, it's strongly sexually arousing or stimulating, violating the sexual sense of shame in the average person, against decent concept of morals concerning sex. In actual practice, only the first criteria is used, because if the first criteria is met, it's usually deemed that the other 2 are also met as well. So it's usually the first criteria that becomes a big issue. And that's why, you know, people have to put these scribbles on the genital parts in these videos and those kind of things so they will not be strongly sexually arousing. But it sounds strange, but that is the dogma. Now, this Chatterley case employed this thing called the inherent, what I call the inherent shame theory. And what it does is that this is what it actually says in the court rulings. Even uncivilized people hide their genitals. Mankind across the world possesses an inherent natural sense of shame in regards to acts of sex. This sense of shame separates mankind from animals, and no culture on earth allows sexual acts to be performed in public. In all cultures, the sex is an act, private act, indicative of the sense of shame the act produces. These kinds are mentioned in the Lady Chatterley's Lovers case, Supreme Court ruling. What I want to tell you is that it does not cite any sources whatsoever. So it doesn't, it's not. So that's why I wrote that's what I wrote. This Lady Chatterley's case was ruled on philosophical grounds. It doesn't cite anything. You know, it doesn't like recite any papers or like anthropological work but this is what the judges thought in 1957. And damn them. And this is what the court ruling also says about the harm, because you have to understand this Lady Chatterley's Lovers case has never been changed. It's been supplemented, and you know it has been elaborated in past cases. But this case, as a precedent, has never been denied. So if you want to understand about the what the obscenity law is about in Japan, we have to go back to here. And this is what the harm of pornography says. Since obscene literature excites and stimulates sexual desire, it must therefore produce a sense of shame in the reader. Too much literary stimulation would, and it just continues on, first it would paralyze mankind's innately good conscience in regards to the subject of sexual intercourse and sex-related matters. Second, this paralyzing would lead mankind to lose its control of reason. Lastly, this loss of reasoning power would make mankind behave licentiously and entrainingly and induce him to decide the established concepts of sex morality and order. It could result in confusion across society if enough readers were reading obscene material at the same time. And again, does not cite any sources. Okay, so this is something that they made up in their mind. There's no sources. It doesn't cite any papers. So again, this is a philosophical ruling, but it's still binding. And there's another approach that's called the moral physician's approach. And this is what the courts actually said. The courts are invested with the duty of protecting society from moral degeneration and must approach the problem of obscenity with a logical, critical attitude like a physician treating a patient. This is what it says. Thus, the changing attitudes of society are not to be taken into account by the courts, and the courts are to take an approach of an objective viewer when faced with the question of obscenity. So this is what it wrote. So this is what some people call a moral physician's approach. And this is how the judges should act. And this part hasn't been changed either. It still stands as precedent, although I'm sure it has changed from what I feel as a practitioner, actual practitioner. I think it's changed, but this still leaves. And this does create a lot of problems. Oops, I turned it up. Which one? Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. And what this boils down to and what problem it creates is that, in the United States, obscenity is an issue of fact, right? It's got to be decided by the jury, even under the Miller standard. But here, it's an issue of law because basically, the judges did not cite anything. It's a philosophical ruling. So basically, I know it when I see it. Approach still lives on, and obscenity currently is an issue of law. And that is how the Lady Chatler's Lover case ruled, that obscenity is an issue of law and not a fact. So what does it mean? Well, it means that the courts are not bound by the evidence. So, but the judges do pay a lot of attention to it de facto, but theoretically they're not bound by evidence. So for example, if I would be presenting an obscenity case right now, I could show them all the pictures. You could use your smartphones and access all these uncensored sites from abroad and see all these like adult material from other countries. You could see it, and in Japan, you had with these scribbles on the genitals. It can get strange. You could do that, but the judges could ignore that and decide what the moral standard would be. That is how the Chatley has run. That is how the Chatley Lovers case has ruled, and it is still in place. Various cases that related Chatley. Well, I could go on this issue, but I could just give you the most noted cases that did have a good ruling. There's the Marquis de Sade case. This is one that says that artistic value could potentially absolve a material from label obscenity. Although in the case this is not, but it opened, maybe there could be an artistic value defense. This is how the court ruling. And it also allowed external factors to be considered, which means external factors means that's something that's not in the literature or in the text, something else, like how it was sold or how it was advertised, or, and those kind of things could also be considered. So this is the Sade case. There are other various cases after the Chatler. There was the Yojohan Fusuma no Shitabari case. Well, it's the Shitabari case. This was allegedly written by a very famous laureate called Nagai Kafu, and there was a lot of controversy because the court dare to rule that a work by Nagai Kafu was obscene, but Nagai Kafu never revealed that he was the true author. So, but anyway. And this case let out a very thorough criteria about deciding on what obscenity is. Now, this does say a lot of stuff, but what it tries to do is, what it boils down to is it's just trying to elaborate on the three Chatley criteria that I mentioned out. And to determine if those criteria are met, you should consider these factors. That is what they're trying to say. And first of all, one is the relative boldness, detail, and general style of depictions of sexual acts. Second, proportion of work comprised of sexual descriptions. 3, relationship in a literary work between sexual descriptions and intellectual context of the story. 4. The degree to which artistry and thought content mitigate the sexual excitement induced by writing. 5. Relationship of sexual portrayals to the structure and unfolding of the story. And then, taking these factors in mind, overall, the work should be classified as obscene if it wantonly excites and or stimulates sexual desires, affronts the other person's normal sense of shame, and violates proper concepts of sexual morality. This is what it says. Now, how do we judge this by? We judge this by shakai tsunen. I don't know if how many of you know the word shakai tsunen. Well, it would probably mean something like social concepts or social norms, but it has to be a healthy one. And what's healthy or not, it's up to the judge to decide. So that's how it is. This is the criteria set out. And this is the other famous case called about Robert Mapplethorpe. This was a case that was handled in 2008. Now this is a very important case because this was a case in which when actually the Supreme Court ruled that the photographic works of Robert Mapplethorpe had artistic value and thus were not obscene. I mean, all these were, so this is a very straightforward, and this is how the court rules. I think it's very authoritarian, and I think this could lead to why Roku Nashiko was targeted. As a highly acclaimed contemporary artist, Robert Mapplethorpe had produced photographs focused on essence of human existence through depictions of the body, sexuality, and nudity. This disputed book was a collection of his major works and photographs assembled in the book of Mapplethorpe's most important and recognized work. Therefore, the publication was aimed at providing the audience with an opportunity to examine the artistic qualities of Mapplethorpe's work as a whole. The photographs in the book captured a wide variety of themes, including self-portrait, flowers, still objects, male and female nudity. Among the 384 pages, there were only 19 sexually explicit photographs. Therefore, the quantity of such images contained in the book was quite small. In addition, these images were in black and white and did not directly depict sexual intercourse. Considering the artistic values of the work, weight of the sexually explicit images within the book as a whole, and the technique and the skills needed to deliver the artistic values, the court found that they all contribute to moderate the work's appeal to the prurient interest. So it was difficult to accept the argument that the book in question mainly appeals primarily to sexual interests of people who see it. So this is how the court has ruled, and there's more rulings that I'm sure. And respecting the healthy social trend, the shakai tsune at the time of the customs confiscation of the book in 1999, the court decided that it no longer fell into the category of materials that violated society's healthy sexual morality as defined in the customs law. You could look at the, as a highly acclaimed contemporary artist, Roku Nashiko was not. And when she was a Zen artist, she may be, but eventually, but she was not a highly acclaimed contemporary artist. So I'm assuming with this court ruling in mind, the police may have been looking for their target from the would-be great artists and not among great artists. Now, how does artistic value matter? Well, as I tell you, the Chatelain standard, there's 3 criteria: strongly sexually arousing or stimulating, right? What art does, it mitigates the first criteria about strongly sexually arousing or stimulating. It mitigates it. As it's shown here in the Yojohan Fusuma case, if you look at the number 4, this is what it says: the degree to which artistry and thought content mitigate the sexual excitement induced. Sorry, I'm not used to this. Sorry, excuse me. To excitement induced by the writing. So, where does art fit into? So, usually it's about the interpretation of the criteria number 1. So, if it has artistic value, it is deemed that somebody who would be looking at it would be, not looking at an erotic, but with an artistic view, or therefore they would not be sexually stimulated, which is, of course, untrue. But now, what is the current standard I'm always asked by these questions, and the honest lawyer's answer, honest answer would be million shades of gray. That's the answer that I could give in an honest way, but I mean there are degrees of gray that looks almost white to that. Most look very black. So what is the current standard? Now I'm gonna say this with a disclaimer, okay? Anybody who follow this gets busted, I'm not gonna be responsible for it. Although I would be willing to take your case for a fee. But I'm not gonna do this case for nothing, even if you tell me that, I got in this trouble because I believed in you. I'm not gonna admit that. So please bear that in mind. Text is okay. I mean, the text has been gone after in the past 30 years. I think that any form that it goes in text, I think that'll be okay. Nudity, I think that's also okay also. Basic mirror nudity is okay. Public hair, I think it's okay. Still at this point. Genitals, now this is where I think the front line of battle is right now, is about the genitals. And genitals with intercourse and sexual acts, it's a no. I got the Jolly Roger mark over here. This is a 9, and that's where the genitals issue, exposed genitals, is where it is. If it's just merely showing it, I don't know. I think they don't pay much attention. But if if much attention is directed, or you're dealing with the genital, you're fondling with it, or trying to open it, or trying to whatever you want with the genitals, I think that may cause problems. And also, it probably depends on sort of the context. If it's just appeared in the paper, or is it focused on genitals? But this is how the current standard is, and as I'm telling you, I'm saying this with a disclaimer. Now, this is my opinion. The trend has been to relax the standard, but this trend for relaxation is not guaranteed to last. Because I tell you, because obscenity is not an issue of fact, but of legal interpretation, the courts are free to become strict in rulings once more. Now, I mean, I showed you all these various criteria that has been set up by the courts, right? And when I represented the Shogunkan in Mr. Kishi, the president of the Shogunkan, was charged, I had a very interesting chance to cross-examine the policeman, who had actually determined that this manga was obscene. I cross-examined him, okay? I put him on the stand, I cross-examined him, and I asked him about all these criteria set out in the case names. He didn't even know the name of the cases. Then why do you think obscene? Well, you can see it. It's exposed. So the courts can say all they want, but in actual practice on the police, maybe the upper high-ranking officers know it, but the police who are operating on the ground level, it's whether you can see it or not. I think that is all there is to it. The current trends, I'm using these trends. Well, first of all, the police are trying to push the line back from genitals, okay? They know that that's where the battle is, and they're very concerned that if they lose this battle over here, they might, then this whole issue of obscenity might be just on paper, and they would lose all the power. Remember, Japan has very strong, it protects freedom of expression very strongly, at least on the law. In fact, obscenity is the only statute that allows police to intervene with artwork or expression that doesn't have a victim. If it's libel, we have criminal libel, so if it's libel or copyright infringement, they can go after that, but that it requires a victim. But without a victim, this is the only way that they can really go after, and I think they want to keep it as a tool. Why I think so? Well, first of all, there was the Rokude Nashiko case, and right after that, there was the Aichi Prefecture Art Museum case, which was a photographer was presenting his work in Aichi Prefecture Art Museum, the decent museum, and it did involve exposed genitals, male genitals. And so But what they did was the Aichi Prefecture Police sent a warning to the museum saying that, you know, what you're doing is violating Article 175, take it down. The museum partially complied. It means that what they did was they placed a curtain on the genitals and says that this was placed here by the courtesy of the Aichi Prefecture Police. That was a very smart way of doing it. And also, you know, Rokude Nashiko was about the female genitals. Aichi Prefecture was the male genitals, so maybe they were just trying to be gender equal. Maybe the police are trying to be gender equal. So you go after the vagina, we'll also go after penis. Maybe that was the argument there. What's the background? I think it's the fear. The vagina art has been covered in a lot of major magazines like Shukan Gendai or Shukan Post. That's been published by very big publishers like Shueisha and Shogakukan. And Robert Mapplethorpe case may have changed the social trend. So what they fear is that the social trend may change, and which means that they may lose the battle of fighting over obscenity in the line between the about the exposure of genitals. And I also think it also has to do with the Tokyo Olympic. I think the police just wants to hone their last blade that they have, because they know that the new legislation is very difficult to pass. Well, I'm pretty proud of it, all the resistance we offered against, you know, changing the definition of child pornography to include anime, manga, fictional. We stopped that. There was very strong opposition. There was a national controversy. So they probably thought that it would be difficult to get a new weapon, so they would just probably improvise with what they got, and so they would just want to hone the blade. And why would they want to do it with the obscenity? As I tell you, obscenity is very vague, and you know, it's currently the standard is just about the genitals, but maybe the police think that they can change the standard, you know, to include anything that they think is inappropriate, because basically the rule is just to protect public morality. Just to make sure, now, about the arguments on the Rokude Nashiko case, is the data of the vagina obscene? Well, I put it out on my laptop before I saw it. Well, my first impression was it comes all in white because 3D printer, it's supposed to come in all white plastic, no colors. My first impression was it looks like a Martian landscape. I mean, the mere data, it just doesn't have appeal. It did not appeal to my emotions or the senses, which just doesn't arouse enough information suggestive of actual sexual intercourse or act. It's just there. It's just an object. I don't know. It could be, you know, it could be anything, but it wasn't appealing. There's a lot of arguments when this story went around that a lot of people, especially radical feminists, says that this persecution was a discrimination against female genitalia, but this is a very stupid argument because the police went after the male genitalia as well in the Nagoya Prefecture Art Museum case. So I don't think we should put this one. If you make this kind of argument against the police would just say, okay, we'll just regulate ball. That is how they would typically react. And there are other arguments like, aren't there more hideous porn that the police should be going after? Or they shouldn't be going after, or they should be going after real porn. But there are people who these arguments, but I think this kind of argument is completely off the track. Because do we want the government to decide what's art and what's not art? I don't think so. It's not the government's business to do so. My standpoint on that is pretty clear. Whether it's art or not, it's something for the people who see it. It's for the citizens and the critics to decide about it. It's not the government's job. And so judging the quality of expression is not the business of the government unless there's a specific individual as a victim. I know I'm being very harassed right now. I think it's implying that I am running out of time. I know who to blame. There's two sitting over there. So I just have to skip the good parts. Now, okay, so I just skip this part. I just want realpolitik concerning the Article 175. Now, there's a lot of argument. No, the truth is really isn't much of an argument about getting rid of Article 175. And in a way, I think comparing, because I know how regulation is done in other countries, maybe Article 175 is better, I think, because it's contents neutral. You could do anything you want as you put the scribbles or the blank parts on the genitals. You could do anything you want. You could do sadomaso, you could do homosexuality, you could do bestiality, you could do incest, you could do whatever you want. So it's content neutral. The other examples from other nations, I think they're just trying to enforce certain views about morality or political correctness. I think that's totally wrong. I think they should follow in the example of Japan if they want to maintain their censorship. It's really. And also, I'm sometimes to use Article 175 as an excuse for new legislation. We already have this, why do we need more? This kind of logic sometimes works in the context of lobbying. And also the other stuff is, does the Japanese really want the Article 175 to be abolished? I'm not sure. I mean, this law has been in place ever since we opened up our gates. In the 19th century, it's been in existence, and I mean, there has been a lot of arguments about its application, and lawyers have argued in courts that it's unconstitutional, but there really never was a big public movement against having this bill, this article abolished. I'm not sure. Maybe this has something to do with the concept of harmony or something that Japan likes, and maybe there's some innate fear within the Japanese mind about it. Also, I just want to speak what my philosophy is about on the case for free speech. Is first of all when democratic countries make legislation, they do with majority votes. But I mean, democratic decisions only have tentative or temporary righteousness. We take a vote because we don't know what's right. This is obvious. We don't take a vote to decide about the law of physics. It's meaningless to take a vote on the apples shall not fall from the tree. We should not be doing that, and it's not. So we could always be wrong, and what suppression of speech does is it deprives the minority to the chance to become majority again. Because if you suppress a certain form of speech, like Rorikon manga, and you can't change that anymore because you're showing Rorikon manga around. So let's change this law. We just get you arrested. And also the other important thing is that the land sense of values change. For example, the shunga. How many people know about the shunga? Okay, well, it's erotic stuff that was distributed in the Edo period. It's highly valued as artwork, but the chances are that the people of that era did not consider that as artwork. I mean, the male to female population proportion was very, very, there were a lot more males than females, so it was a tool for jacking off, to be exact, and probably, but now it's very highly prized as art, and the very sad thing is that the British Museum wants to do an exhibition on shunga in Japan, but there's no museum that would accept it. I mean, it's very sad. So sense of values change, so I mean, you could censor it, but I think you could just change it. You shouldn't, maybe according to the value of this era, maybe it'd be wrong, but we should leave room for change. So, and I just want to see that future generations have right to know. And lastly, what really pisses me off is that the pro-censorship people behaving as a privileged class. Now, this is what I mean is when I get interviewed by foreign media or people saying especially about the regulation on the issue of child pornography law, right? And they approach me, and what they say is, well, don't you think it's hideous, or don't you think that it would, instigate crime, or wouldn't these people, make people into criminals? And I always ask the reporters, this is a question that I often ask reporters is, okay, since you must be making coverage on this, did you see a lot of stuff? And they always say, yes, I saw a lot of it, it's horrible. Did you become a sex predator? And the answer is always no. And if somebody told me that after seeing all the material, I have to admit that I became a sex predator myself, I would change my views. But that has never happened. That has never happened. And I can tell them, okay, I'm a lawyer, I'll keep confidential, tell me, did you become sex predator? And they always say no. Maybe they're lying, but I don't know. But But they always tell me, and then I always ask the question, how do you know? If you're saying so, how could you know that these have these very bad effect in people? They say, well, I'm okay, but the other people may not be so okay. This is what really angers me, and this is a trait that is prevalent, I think, is among the people who are pro censorship. I'm okay, but you're not. So that's the end of my story. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so I think we have time for a few questions. I'm sorry we went a little bit longer, but if anyone has a burning question for any one of us, please go right ahead. A few of them.
Hi, Don Kimball from Kyoto PR. I work with media every day these days, and even though I'm an expert in Sophia and help myself, I had a few questions for actually all the panelists regarding kind of the media perspective here. And so, yeah, for the first two, one of the things I've noticed is many of the critical articles are coming from kind of media that tend to be, I guess, a little bit more on the left-leaning, anti-Japan, you might say, side. And for, in terms of legal articles, what are your thoughts about the discourse lately of, for example, servers being located abroad but aimed at Japanese consumers, and what are the legal ramifications of that?
I sometimes think that we Japanese tend to be masochistic. So I know a lot of Japanese who do appreciate, for being criticized by foreign media. I'm a nationalist. I'm joking, but I don't like it. But that does have a tendency so what they want to do is they want to use the Western view as an authority to get their way in Japan. So that may be. And as for the media that's directed towards the Western or foreign readers, I think maybe it's just because that Japan, isn't much. I think that in order for the Japanese issue to get attention, they have to describe Japan as being weird or unique in a certain way. I do see that tendency, sort of, but I'm not really an expert on this, so I'll just have to hand over this microphone.
We have a hard out here at 9 o'clock, so we have time for maybe 2 questions. I know there are 2 questions in this office.
Hi, Sophie Knight from Reuters. Patrick, you mentioned, or your talk was based around the idea of lumping together all manga under the same category and umbrella, and I think it was a very well-made argument. But are there any types of manga which you yourself find unacceptable or think are obscene or should be banned or might incite the kind of things that you're talking about?
Thanks for your question. I think what I would say to that is it's a dangerous slope to expand the authority into what people are thinking so this is okay, but they might have the wrong thoughts. If it's a drawing, I think the argument holds that we should be very careful about saying that that's something that should be obscene, it shouldn't be shown, it should not be thought, it should not be shared. Just to tie to Takashi's argument, when the law is arguing, well, they might be aroused by this material, I don't want lawyers and bureaucrats to tell me what might and might not arouse me. That's way too deeply internal for someone to be deciding that my thoughts might be veering towards the obscene. Right. So I'd say it's a very dangerous slope. The expansion of authority is very much in tie with, I think, a sort of thought policing that, and a certain kind of, not a police state, but certainly a kind of conservative agenda that we should be very careful about.
Hello? Okay, sorry. Possibly a very stupid question here, but you focused a lot on what Jake Elstein wrote in this article, which to be honest I hadn't seen until tonight. And I think one of you basically said that he's had a lot of experience in Japan, so what was he thinking? So what maybe a stupid question here, did you ask him?
No, I did not.
Patrick, did you?
With this article, this
Yeah.
particular article is just, for my particular argument, it's just one case among many that shows that anime and manga was lumped together with child pornography. What Jake Adelstein personally thinks about that is beside the point. I think he's part of a larger sort of group of people who see all of the material as potentially problematic, and all of it should in fact be monitored and perhaps regulated. So I don't really, for me, it doesn't matter so much what he was thinking.
I would respectfully disagree. I mean, I got the distinct impression from the talk, and sorry I came a bit late. The viewpoint wasn't, it was a question of what the viewpoint was, so why not ask him? What was going through your mind when you actually wrote this? I mean, a lot of it was about message. Why did you write these words the way you wrote them? You're a professional writer, you chose your words. Why did you choose these words?
To be fair, the article was co-written by someone else. I had and I wrote the two names there. I had the impression that Jake probably wrote most of the criticism against AKB48 and the Grab Your Idols and the under-15s. And I had the impression that possibly the other author just wanted to criticize manga. And you are right, I can contact him and ask him about that.
I contacted him.
But, oh, you did?
I
Okay.
asked him.
All right,
May I say
and-
what he said?
Yes, please.
So he says that on the issue of manga, he's neutral.
Right.
What he wanted to focus on was specifically child pornography with a real victim, a real life victim, as opposed to a
Right.
drawing.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll repeat this. So during the lecture, I was in contact with Jake Edelstein via Facebook Messenger, so I did ask him. And he says, I can quote this, I'm neutral on the manga issue, I don't like it. Junior Idol is another story.
Right. And that's-
So I think what Renato was saying is largely accurate.
Right. But you were right to just message him. We didn't. Yeah. Okay.
Knowing Jake a little bit, I think there's a larger issue here. Jake is on the board of directors of the Polaris Project that deals with human trafficking, and I think perhaps as he draws the lines, this is getting caught up in that particular line drawing. And largely this goes to a question of, can you invoke any kind of international standards on this? At some point in time, obviously, we have to. We have time for maybe one more question. Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a student, but I also work for Anime News Network part-time. Just recently we had a case of manga being recalled by the government because there were complaints of immoral acts in it, and it wasn't marked with an 18 marker.
In the US?
Yeah, that's right. The Kadokawa incident, it was based off of an arrogant. Do you think that this, by restricting manga to recalling it and putting it under the 18 marker, do you think that restricts the freedom of speech?
This is maybe more a question for Takashi, but I would just say that in that particular case, as far as I understand it, it was the fact they didn't put the mark on it. The actual expression itself, and this is what Takashi was saying, is actually much more free in terms of what you can draw in Japan. That was picked up because it didn't have the mark. If it had been zoned properly, it doesn't matter what they had drawn. So in a way, I think that doesn't necessarily show the government overreaching in that place. I think it just shows that they're watching. So.
Just can I make a follow-up real quick? But actually a lot of our readers actually said that, well, but you know, if we mark everything with 18 and put it away, just because some people consider it immoral if they put it away on the 18 section, we're blocking people who are under 18, maybe they're 17, 16, we're blocking them from experiencing content that is being censored for them. Do you think that's bad?
Generally speaking, zoning could be a good idea if it's done in a correct way, but personally I'm pretty skeptical about whether you could really draw a line about if it's too early for someone of a particular age, because each child has different development grades, right? And personally I think that's something for the parent to decide and not the government's issue. And I looked at the manga. I think it was pretty boring. It wouldn't have sold well anyway, personally. But whether it should have been put with a yellow circle that says for adults, could be, but could be not. I think it's pretty much a borderline. And you can't really draw a clear line on these issues. But what I was saying, when you introduce zoning, but you can't like say that some people have a right not to see. Because when you start mentioning that people have a not to see, it means eradicating a certain form of expression. So what the people have is not to be surprised, not to be taken off guard. That may be logic to justify zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. With this kind of turnout on a Monday night, I really wish we did have more time to discuss this, because obviously there's a lot of interest. I'd like to thank the panelists. I'd particularly like to thank Patrick Galbraith for setting this up.